like books.
Books are great.
Let's
Guess
go
we'll read some
books.
Hey. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing.
Good. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Thank you to all of our bookworms for sticking with us for so long.
All of our 10 bookworms?
Yeah, all 10 of our bookworms.
Okay. Do you want to, shout them out and make them do a Patreon and all that? Patron?
No. We're good.
Yeah. Okay. You want to talk about feelings?
Sure. I love talking about feelings. Feelings have gotten a bad rap in the Christian world. They have been called everything from unimportant to fleshly.
Which I think you highlighted just because it's a funny word. Fleshly is a funny word.
At the same time, example after example shows how our feelings play an enormous role in our motivation and behavior. How many times have you seen people do ungodly things to one another because of hurt feelings?
Or how many times has someone had to be hospitalized for depression after years and years of trying to ignore the way they felt until they became suicidal? Feelings should neither be ignored nor placed in charge. The Bible says to own your feelings and to be aware of them. They can often motivate you to do much good. The Good Samaritan's pity moved him to go to the injured Israelite. The father was filled with compassion for his lost son and threw his arms around him. Many times Jesus had compassion for the people to whom he ministered.
Feelings come from your heart and can tell you the state of your relationships. They can also tell you if things are going well or if there's a problem. If you feel close and loved, things are probably going well. If you feel angry, you have a problem that needs to be addressed. But the point is, your feelings are your responsibility, and you must own them and see them as your problem so that you can begin to find an answer to whatever issue they're pointing to. Attitudes and beliefs?
I think I have something to say about that last paragraph, but I don't know how to say it on YouTube.
This next section is called Awkward Silences. Attitudes and beliefs. Attitudes have to do with your orientation towards something, the stance you take towards others, God, life, work, and relationships. Beliefs are anything that you accept as true. Often we do not see attitude or belief as the source of discomfort in our life. We blame other people as did our first parents, Adam and Eve. We need to own our attitudes and convictions because they fall within our property line. We are the ones who feel their effect and the only ones who can change them. The tough thing about attitudes is that we learn them very early in life. They play a big part in the map of who we are and how we operate. People who have never questioned their attitudes and beliefs can fall prey to the dynamic that Jesus referred to as turning the page. Jesus referred to when he described people holding on to the traditions of men instead of the commands of God.
People with boundary problems usually have distorted attitudes about responsibility. They feel that to hold people responsible for their feelings, choices, and behaviors is mean. However, Proverbs repeatedly says that setting limits and accepting responsibility will save lives. Behaviors have consequences. Consequences will never be the same. As Paul says, a man reaps what he sows. If we study, we will reap good grades. If we go to work, we will get a paycheck. If we exercise, we will be in better health. If we act lovingly towards others, we will have closer relationships. On the negative side, if we sow idleness, irresponsibility, or out-of-control behavior, we can expect to reap poverty, failure, and the effects of loose living. These are natural consequences of our behavior.
The problem comes when someone interrupts the law of sowing and reaping in another person's life. A person's drinking or abuse should have consequences for the drinker or the abuser. Stern discipline awaits him who leaves the path, says Proverbs 15:10. To rescue people from the natural consequences of their behavior is to render them powerless. This happens a lot with parents and children. Parents often yell and nag instead of allowing their children to reap the natural consequences of their behavior. Parenting with love and limits, with warmth and consequences, produces confident children who have a sense of control over their lives. Choices. We need to take responsibility for our choices. This leads to the fruit of self-control.
A common boundary problem is disowning our choices and trying to lay the responsibility for them on someone else. Think for a moment how often we use the phrase, I had to, or she or he made me, when explaining why we did or did not do something. These phrases betray our basic illusion that we are not active agents in many of our dealings. We think someone else is in control, thus relieving us of our basic responsibility.
We need to realize that we are in control of our choices, no matter how we feel. This keeps us from making choices to give reluctantly or under compulsion, as in 2 Corinthians 9:7 says.
Paul would not even accept the gift that he felt was given because the giver felt he had to give it. He once said a gift back that any favor you do will be spontaneous and not forced. Joshua said the same thing to the people in his famous choice verse. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. Jesus said a similar thing to the worker who was angry about the wage for which he had agreed to work. Friend, I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius, a day's wage? The man had made a free choice to work for a certain amount and was angry because someone who had worked fewer hours had gotten the same wage.
Another example is the prodigal son's brother, who had chosen to stay at home and serve, and then was resentful. Not satisfied with his choice, he needed to be reminded that he made a choice to stay home. Throughout the scriptures, the people are reminded of their choices and asked to take responsibility for them. Like Paul says, if we choose to live by the Spirit, we will live. If we choose to follow our sinful nature, we will die. That is also in Galatians 6, 7, 8. Making decisions based on others' approval, on guilt, breeds resentment, a product of our sinful nature. We've been so trained by others on what we should, finger quotes, do, that we think we are being loving when we do things out of compulsion.
Setting boundaries inevitably involves taking responsibility for your choices. You are the one who makes them. You are the one who must live with their consequences. And you are the one who may be keeping yourself from making the choices you could be happy with. That's pretty profound.
Yeah? We all need to hear that from time to time. Let's do one more. Values. What we value is what we love and assign importance to. Often we do not take responsibility for what we value. We are caught up in valuing the approval of men rather than the approval of God. Because of this misplaced value, we miss out on life. We think that power and riches and pleasure will satisfy our deepest longings, which is really for love.
When we take responsibility for our out-of-control behavior caused by loving the wrong things, or valuing things that have no lasting value, when we confess that we have a heart that values things that will not satisfy, we can receive help from God and His people to create a new heart within us. Boundaries help us not to deny, but to own our hurtful values so God can change them. Should we stop there?
No, I want to do one more.
All right.
I haven't hit my limits yet.
Uh-huh.
Two aspects of limits stand out when it comes to creating better boundaries. The first is setting limits on others. This is the component that we most often hear about when we talk about boundaries. In reality, setting limits on others is a misnomer. We can't do that. What we can do is set limits on our own exposure to people who are behaving poorly. We can't change them or make them behave right. Our model is God. He does not really set limits on people to make them behave. God sets standards, but He lets people be who they are and then separates Himself from them when they misbehave, saying in effect, you can be that way if you choose, but you cannot come into my house. Heaven is a place for the repentant, and all are welcome.
But God sets limits. God limits His exposure to evil, unrepentant people, as should we. Scripture is full of admonitions to separate ourselves from people who act in destructive ways. We are not being unloving. Separating ourselves protects love, because we are taking a stand against things that destroy love. The other aspect of the limits that is helpful when talking about boundaries is setting our own internal limits. We need to have spaces inside ourselves where we can have a feeling, an impulse, or a desire without acting on it. We need self-control without repression. We need to be able to say no to ourselves. This includes both our destructive desires and some good ones that are not wise to pursue at a given time. Internal structure is a very important component of boundaries and identity, as well as ownership, responsibility, and self-control.
Talents. Contrast these two responses. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Versus, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the banker, so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. Matthew 25. No other passage better illustrates God-ordained responsibility for ownership and use of talents. Although the example is money, it also applies to internal talents and gifts. Our talents are clearly within our boundaries and our responsibility. Yet taking ownership of them is often frightening and always risky.
The parable of the talents says that we are accountable, not to mention much happier when we are exercising our gifts and being productive. It takes work, practice, learning, prayer, resources, and grace to overcome the fear of failure that the wicked and lazy servant gave into. He was not chastised for being afraid. We are all afraid when trying something new and different. He was chastised for not confronting his fear and trying the best he could. Not confronting our fear denies the grace of God and insults both his giving of the gift and his grace to sustain us as we are learning.
Thoughts?
You want to talk about thoughts? Maybe next time? Can we talk about thoughts next time, please?
My thoughts are, I'm thinking maybe we should think about thoughts next time.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
That we'd like to do it next time.